Conversations with Nicole. Conversations with Nicole. Let's talk about it. Tell me all about it. I'm here. I wanna know what's on your mind. Ooh, the world needs to hear from you, and I'm so glad to have a conversation to reach the nation. And it's all about you. We'll help each other to discover innovative ways to positively change the world. Let's talk about, let's talk about, yeah. Let's talk about conversations with Nicole.
Greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. I am Nicole Everett, your host, and Conversations with Nicole is a talk show based in Tallahassee, Florida, focused on connecting the community through conversation. And today is what I call Mindset Monday. Mindset Monday is an opportunity for you, me, and my guests to have a conversation about whatever it is we want to talk about. And today, we are talking about trauma speaks. Trauma speaks. But before I bring my special guests on, I want to hear from you. We are live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and on the Greater Works Network on Roku TV. So for those of you on Facebook and on YouTube, this is an interactive live, and we definitely want to hear from you. So this is a safe space for us to express ourselves. We are talking all things Black and Brown mental health and wellness, and we want you to connect with a clinician and get your checkup from the neck up. We go get our annual physical exams, but we need to go ahead and get our mental exams and mental checkup as well. So mental in many regards is even more important than physical, because there is no health without mental health. So definitely encouraging folks to do that. But I see some of you chiming in, which is wonderful. So let me give greetings to Mr. Ozzy Daniel from Virginia Beach. Thanks for being here. Lisa Heron Myrick in Tallahassee, and my cousin Denise over in Texas. Thank you for being here tonight. So like, tag, share, tell folks they need to be in here for this conversation, because this is going to be a good one. All right. So my guest, I got connected with her through Antonio White, who's been on the show before. He's actually a clinician based here in Tallahassee. Miss Pwendy Fenelus. She is the owner, founder of Fresh Living Counseling, and she is a Haitian American woman who was born in Florida but spent her formative years on the island of Haiti. After the age of 10, she moved back to South Florida with her family, and she continued her education. She received her bachelor's of social work from Florida Atlantic University in 2011, her master's in social work in 2016 from Stony Brook University. She is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Florida, and she focuses on trauma therapy and working with individuals and families. She, again, began her own private practice recently, and she maintains her own full-time job as a clinical therapist. So she got involved, and hopefully she'll talk to us about this a little bit, with counseling through working with her. She spoke with her college counselor, who encouraged her to try out social work class, and she fell in love with the field of human behavior, specifically learning about trauma work. So help me welcome Miss Pwendy Fenelus.
Hi, Nicole.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So tell the peoples who don't know you, who is Pwendy? Who is Pwendy Fenelus? Let them know. Who are you? Not what you do, but who are you?
Okay, so good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Pwendy, and I always start off by saying yes, the P is pronounced since it's such a unique first name. And a little bit about me, as Nicole said, I am of Haitian descent. So both of my parents are Haitian. I am a native of South Florida. So I really do feel like I had the experience of both worlds of the island of Haiti and America. And I am also a writer. So I do enjoy writing and just socializing and being a foodie overall. That's a little bit about myself besides the work that I do.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We are excited to have you on with us tonight. So, you started your private practice and Fresh Living Counseling. Tell me a little bit about the name.
Yes. Okay. So again, my practice, I am based in South Florida, sunny South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And my practice is also based here. And so when I think of therapy, I really do think that it provides a fresh perspective of
Mm.
your problem. So I really like the word fresh. It made it seem like there was some vibrancy to it.
Okay.
And when I think of fresh living, I kind of think of a palm tree, and it kind of goes with the motif of South Florida.
Yes, it
And
does.
also it was available as a name, you know.
That's important too.
Yes, yes.
People don't recognize how
Mhm.
challenging. I think that's like the most challenging part of starting a business is trying to figure out what you want to call it.
Right, exactly.
Mhm. Indeed. So, there was a college counselor that you talked to, or someone, and they recommended, social work, and that's kind of how you got on this track.
Yes, I did not know social work existed. I did not
Mhm.
know that field was a thing. I knew of psychologists, psychiatrists, those kind of things, but social work as a degree, I did not know about that. So I entered college as a business major and I wanted to work in the fashion industry. And that was my pathway. And I was struggling in my classes. And I'm a pretty astute student, and I was struggling, and I think it was because it wasn't the place that I was supposed to be in. So
Mhm.
I went to speak with my college counselor, and she asked me what did I want to do
Mhm.
for a career. What did I like to do when I was younger? And I told her I always wanted to help people. I actually wanted to be like a missionary, but missionaries don't get paid. So you don't have to go to school to be a missionary. So she was like, how about social work? You know, it's a human behavior field and you get to help people in this manner. And so I told her I would check it out. I did. I fell in love. All of my grades changed to like A's after that semester. And I actually look forward to going to classes. And ever since then, I've been in this field.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, that is a pretty good indicator. So we're glad you found your passion.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so let's dive in. And again, y'all, this is interactive, so we want to hear from you as well. So trauma speaks. When you and I talked initially, that was something that popped out to me. And so I want to start out by defining trauma. And then what does it mean trauma speaks?
Yeah.
Trauma doesn't have a voice, does it? How does it speak? So let's go. Let's start there.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of different definitions of trauma, believe it or
Mhm.
not. I try to immerse myself in the world of trauma. The more I can learn about it for myself, for my clients, I try to get as much resources. And as far as I could tell from my perspective, there are a lot of definitions of trauma. So I want to kind of put them all together for you. So I wrote this down here. I put that trauma is an event that leaves an impacting wound on your mind, your memory, and your general sense of self. So it changes your view of either yourself and how you experience the world. That's how I would define trauma.
Okay. All right. So let me pause there and then ask the viewers. So again, this is a safe space. If you will, let us know. Church finger, wave your hand, thumbs up, something. Have any of you experienced trauma firsthand? And read that definition again one more time.
So is any event that has left an impacting wound on your sense of self.
Okay.
And it has impacted how you experience the world.
Okay. All right. So anybody experience trauma, an experience that has
I'm
left
gonna
a wound?
put my hands up too.
I'm gonna put my church finger up as
There
well. Okay.
you go.
All right. They're a little slow moving, and I know there's a little bit of a delay, but hopefully they'll be chiming in. So I would imagine that most everybody has. All right. They're chiming in now. So Nora said yes. Marjorie, absolutely. Yes. Kedrick, yes. He got his whole hand raised up. All right. All right. So yes. So many of us. We got at least 4 people, right? 5. Sure. Ozzy did, and he said my mindset had to change about it for true healing. Okay. All right. Tony Lamar, thank you for being here. All right. And Deborah said absolutely. All right. So okay. So all of us have gone through trauma. All right. And
There's no shame. There's no shame in it.
there's no
You know?
shame.
Yeah. A lot of us, that's the biggest thing that prevents us from freedom. It's because that sense of shame, nobody will understand. I'm the only one. And from the small sample that you have through the comments right there, it says, hi, and hi,
Hey,
Antonio.
Antonio.
From the small sample that you have through your comments, you can see that the majority has experienced some form of trauma.
Yes. So trauma, what type of impact does trauma have on us? Like, how does trauma speak in our lives? And I know that's a kind of a loaded question, so I guess let's start out from a physical standpoint.
Yeah. So I think the most vocal way that trauma speaks is through our physical body.
Okay.
Like one way, so trauma has a voice, in one way or the other, it will be heard. And one of the major way that it's heard, like the loudest, is through our bodies. So many of us, simple symptoms, tension headaches. A lot of times we have a lot of stress and anxiety in our bodies, and we tend to, push it down, and, we just got to work, and we have tasks to do. We have kids to pick up. We have all that stuff. And then you're like, oh my gosh, my head hurts. And we just think that, oh, it's just a headache, it's a lot going on. But it's the stress and trauma that's in your body that is saying, do something about this. Let me out. Relieve the tension for me. And we tend to relieve the tension with very immediate relievers, pain relievers, Advil, Aleve, things of that sort. But we haven't really dealt with the source of the stress, or the stressor, or the source of the pain. So
I'm gonna pause you right there. Right. So that medicine, right, this over the counter, whatever, is basically kind of maybe numbing the pain, or taking our mind off the pain, but not really dealing with the source of the pain.
Right.
Okay.
And here you see that the tension headache returns and returns and returns over and over and over again, and until you deal with the actual stressor that is causing it. And that's one way that trauma could speak. That's just a very simple way. And we can get even deeper to even down to the cellular level. Our bodies are very amazing. And down to the cellular or molecular level, where it could start morphing the cells into even cancerous cells, or things that are very destructive to our internal organs. That is how integrative trauma, something that happens to our emotions and our minds and our hearts, can affect our physical body.
Wow.
So trauma definitely has a voice, and the more we are aware that it has a voice, and the more that we are willing to be humble enough to listen to what it's saying to us, then I think the better chances we have at giving it some relief, giving it some healing, and so forth.
Now, I think sometimes we can ignore those stressors, and maybe we might put these conditions on something environmental. Maybe it's our living conditions, or perhaps we may try to put it on it being hereditary. Well, Big Mama had,
High blood pressure, whatever.
or you know, Pop had, whatever. And so, and not to discount that it couldn't be hereditary, but I think we also need to examine, our stressors and our levels of anxiety and depression and trauma, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is definitely, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is definitely a reality of genetics playing, a part of certain diseases, physical diseases that has nothing to do with trauma. Not everybody experience trauma. A large portion of us do, but not everybody experience trauma. So we can't just say, oh, I have this, it's because of trauma. However, one of the things that we're trained to do as clinicians is when a client comes to us and they have a problem, we try to rule out first anything medical before we go into the psychosomatic, symptoms of it all. And I also think medical doctors do that and then refer back to us. But yeah, so there is a real sense of like, you do need to go to your medical doctor and rule out anything that really may be related to your genetics and to something medical happening. And when that is ruled out and the problem persists, then definitely seek other forms of help.
So Ozzy is a clinician out of Virginia Beach. He said, true, it is loaded right into the cellular level. Then it changes your breathing cycle also.
Yeah.
And we know breathing, oxygen, getting enough oxygen, taking those deep breaths are very important.
Yeah. And that's the first thing that's impacted, right? It's our nervous system. Something shocks us, whether it's a news or, if it's an accident, the first thing that is impacted is, it's your breath. And then if that gets stuck like that, it's always going, if anything triggers that memory of that trauma, that's how your breath is going to respond, whether you like it or not. It's an automated system. It impacts our nerves ending. And so a lot of people who are extremely irritated all the time, and we're like, well, that's just how they are. That's how, that's just their personality. A lot of it is, trauma that's intertwined in there, and that if they had an opportunity to get some relief, would they still be as highly irritated with their families and friends, as they are now?
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, so from a physical standpoint, Ozzy has also expressed that it goes to the cellular level, that breathing, that nervous system, that respiratory system, all of this has an impact on untreated trauma, right? Untreated trauma and the implications of untreated trauma can definitely show up from a physiological standpoint.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, what are some of the, I guess, mental / emotional implications of untreated trauma? Look like Pwendy might have froze on us. All right. Well, while she comes back, I'm gonna just pop her out real quick. Hold on one moment. All right. Here we go. All right. There we go. So I was just asking, in terms of mental and the mental implications or impact the untreated trauma has on your mental capacity and on your emotional capacity. What are some of the implications?
Well, I think that's where we get our beloved DSM-5 from. The implications are a lot. That's where we get the term disorder. There's some type of disorder happening when trauma is left untreated. Trauma is definitely a breeding ground for for a lot of like chaos and disorder. Hence why we have a whole field that deals with human behavior, people that have
Mhm.
mental illness or mental disorders, because they haven't really treated that point of contact of, that point of contact of being wounded in their emotions.
Mhm.
So the implications are a lot. I mean, we can go through all of them: changes in your personality, changes in how you socialize, there's social
Mhm.
anxiety, there's separation anxiety, changes in your mood, like mood dysregulation, or being very overactive, or being very hypo active. So there are many, many ways that trauma speaks or shows up when it's
Mhm.
left untreated.
Okay.
Ways.
Now, I want to kind of address trauma again, just kind of going back to that definition, because something, an experience, so the very same experience might be traumatic for you but not traumatic for me,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so mindset has a lot to do with that, right?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mindset has a lot to do with that, but here's how I like to kind of see it in regards to mindset.
Okay.
Mindset is something that you can work on totally, kind of like on your own. You can go find a really good therapist, or a mental health professional, and you can kind of process out that traumatic experience with them with certain interventions. That's changing your mindset about the trauma and providing some sort of, relief. But when I think about mindset, or like when there's a where when there's a traumatic experience that happens, um, the reason that science sees that one person can experience the same trauma and they're fine, and the other person can experience the same trauma and they are not fine, it's what happens post traumatic event, like what happens after the trauma. So an example that's often used is if a child gets sexually abused or molested, and they go to the adult in their life, their caregiver or someone, and they confess that to that adult. The way that that caregiver handles that information can really impact, can really affects the impact of that child's trauma. So if the caregiver says that didn't happen, you're lying, or if it happens, you better keep your mouth shut, that is going to leave a longer lasting effect on that child than if an adult says, I'm going to protect you. Thank you for letting me know. And they handle it way differently than blaming the child or ignoring them. So science have shown that the way a traumatic experience is handled or is integrated to the person that has experienced it, immediately or soon after the event happened, has a greater impact on that, on how the person holds that trauma. Another piece, there's many other pieces related to our genetics, how we function, how our families have taught us to function, and also just resiliency. It
Hmm.
depends on the person.
Interesting. Now, I have not heard anyone, at least I don't recall anyone saying that, but I can definitely see how that can be the case, how it's dealt with immediately following. And I guess if the experience continues,
Oh yeah,
to take place
for
in
sure,
the future, right?
for sure. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. So, again, I really want to just reiterate how trauma is speaking in our lives on a daily, right? Untreated trauma.
Mhm.
And, what we need to do to treat it, number one, right?
Yeah.
Because even though it may have been a singular occurrence, and it may have happened, 25 years ago, it can still have an impact, right?
Yep. It
Hmm.
can. And a lot of times you hear the terms big T and little t, like big trauma, little trauma, things of that sort. And And I think most of us, we focus on big trauma. We think, you know, like if there's a very concrete abuse that happened, that's a big T trauma. But little T trauma, or just little things like being ignored by your parents, or being told not to speak up, or just little things that are, they're so small that like they get past you. But there's like, it's almost like that phrase that says, you know, death by a thousand. There's a phrase like that, death by a thousand nicks or something like that. Is like small nicks, but it's like it's death by a thousand little nicks instead of like one big knife or something like that. So the little T traumas are not often looked at by us because they're so small. We don't think they're even traumas, but they are. Depending on the person, it can be.
No, that's a good point. I think we had Dr. Terry Parks on, and he was talking about how, you know, a drip of water by itself is not going to do anything, but if it continues to drip and drip and drip and drip and drip and drip and drip, you know, after a while it does make an impact. And so, you know, that's something that is you know, we can't just dismiss it because and I've not heard the term big T and little T, but that's a great example.
And talking about that drip from the previous guest, it makes me think of prisoners of wars, that they used to use that tactic, you know, where they had a drip on the prisoner, and they're like, what is this going to do? A little drip of water. But then after days, they start to lose their mind because they're like this, and they couldn't move, you know, they just put it on their head like that. So a little thing can make a huge impact if it's long lasting and untreated.
Indeed. So we got a question from Mr. Johnny Johnson, who's a regular here. He said, how do you recognize that there is a problem? Because you may not even recognize it or identify it as trauma. That's just the way mama is, or that's just the way, you know, life is. This is just your lot in life. And this is, you know, I think, especially with children who might not have another household, or, you know, another set of parents or adults to give guidance or as an example, you know, they just think this is the way all parents act, or all, you know, um, adults behave. So how do you recognize that there's a problem?
I think it differs for everybody, like you said, and what community they're a part of, you know. So if everybody around in your family and families around you are, the dysfunction is normal, how would you know that there's something abnormal or dysfunctional about it? But I think one of the ways is taking inventory on how your relationships are your relationships with your parents or your significant other or your children, you know, or your bosses or friends. How are those relationships? Are they full of life? Are they good? Are they healthy? Or are there like relational toxic or unhealthy patterns that are there? Are there frictions and aggravations that happen that like causes you to be a little bit more distant or be more codependent on that relationship? I think relationships really help us to find out what's going on the inside of us. That's why if you know that phrase, no man is an island. So if we were on an island, we would never know that something was wrong with us because we're just by ourselves with some trees and some animals. But when you come into any type of group or community, whether it's your work group or your family group or church group, and you kind of give a little bit of yourself to that environment, you will very soon find out if you are being a little bit truthful and authentic to yourself. You will very soon find out if there is a problem through how people receive you or experience you.
Indeed. All right. Antonio said, our ways of coping, avoidance, etc., can sometimes be our own downfall. It's important to be aware and mindful of those little T's so we don't recycle them.
So good. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
one thing that is really hard. I love studying about defense mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
because I was reading it and I was like, I think I do 90% of this list. I'm like, I have to check myself because
Mm-hmm.
defense mechanisms are so they could be so what's the word I'm looking for? They're not like the opposite of simplistic. They could be very sophisticated, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to the point where we don't even know we're functioning with our defense mechanism. It's meant to protect us. So, yeah, like the little t traumas sometimes create defense mechanism. That's how we socialize with people. Like if we get angry really fast, or if we avoid really quickly, or if we're workaholics. You know, there's a lot of things that are deemed positive by society, but they're really defense mechanisms helping us to not deal with our traumas. So it's
Hmm.
also good to look at those. Mhm.
Wow. So that is that's kind of eye-opening, actually, to be quite honest with you, Pwendy. That we got these defense mechanisms going on, maybe because of some traumas that took place, these little t traumas, and not even really recognizing it. Right?
It
Yeah.
was eye-opening for me. Like when I was like reading up on it and I was reading the list, I was like, how? I was like, okay, well, I have like a lot of defense mechanisms that I use that I was not even aware of.
Mm,
And then when I sit and reflected and thought about it some more, I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense why I would use this defense because of what happened here. So,
mhm.
yeah. But all of that, Nicole, and your audience, is that it takes time. It doesn't mean you have to sit and be quiet and be like, oh, like none of that. You don't have to do that. That actually makes me more distracted. Like this makes, and no, we're not doing this. I'm not doing this.
No,
And
we're not. That's
you
the
know,
move, right? If you got to do that just right in order to
hey,
like plug
there's
in, don't
something
you?
about it, but
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
No. Okay. All
I
right.
don't want. But yeah, if that works for you, go ahead. But I'm just saying that you don't have to do it. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
find it even more distracting to sit in silence and do this. You can continue working on it,
Mm-hmm.
but most people find it very distracting to sit in silence. But whatever you have to do to get into your heart, to listen, to what your heart is saying, what your body is saying about something you may have walked through that you didn't completely process, then do it. Whatever you have to do, whether it's going on a bike ride and having a clinical podcast in your ears, or having nothing in your ears and just being focused on that, like do it. A lot of times movement help people to not feel scared to go there. That's why some people, they like yoga and meditating. To some people it works. To a lot of people it scares them because it's like it is too quiet to go into something, that dark by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever works for you, find it,
Right.
and give yourself time to listen to your trauma. How,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, trauma speaks.
Yes. All right. So we got a lot of comments and questions real quick, but I wanted to just pause real quick to let folks know that if you are just tuning in, I am with Miss Pwendy Fenelus, and we are talking about Trauma Speaks, how untreated trauma impacts you physically, emotionally, mentally, and all of these. And so we've been talking about right now defense mechanisms. So Kedrick wants to know, what are some resources for discovering defense mechanisms?
That is a really great question, Mr. Jones. I would have to find out some more resources for you. We are going to share some resources, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the this episode. And in those resources, you will definitely find some tools of how to locate what are your defense. One of the ones I'll highlight it at the end, but is Mr. Adam Young's website. He has some downloadable sheets that you could print out and just learn more about what are defense mechanisms. He has podcast episodes. So I would suggest that resource.
Indeed. All right. And Michael Cork is with us. Thank you, Cork, for being here right here in Tallahassee. He says it's the accumulation of the little T's that break levees. Defense mechanisms protect, but shouldn't make you delusional because eventually reality can't be avoided.
That part. So if you can leave that comment up, because that last part, defense mechanism protect but shouldn't make you delusional because eventually reality can be avoided. I experienced this, I believe, I don't know if it was in my own therapy session for myself or if it was like research, but basically it was praising your defense mechanisms for doing their job. Because a lot of times we are embarrassed that we have a defense mechanism that protects us.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not anything to be ashamed of because you needed protection at the time of the trauma. And our bodies are designed that way. Our minds are designed that way for us to live, for us to survive. Your body will fight till the last breath for you to survive. If a person's drowning and choking, you see them gasping for air. Your body is just made that way. It's not meant to just be like, oh, okay, we're just gonna die. Like it's always gonna fight for you to live, even in emotional trauma experiences. So I experienced this where we actually named the defense mechanism that appeared at the time of my trauma. And I didn't shame it. I didn't embarrass it. I didn't judge it. And I just received it for what it did, and thanked the trauma. It was a very imaginative type of therapy session, but thank the trauma for helping my 5-year-old self or 10-year-old self for protecting me. But now I'm an adult and I don't need that kind of protection anymore as a 5-year-old or 10-year-old. I can handle it from this point forward. So it was a very healing thing to do, even with the power of your imagination, to say that, defense mechanism protects, but it shouldn't make you delusional. At one point, you have grown up. At one point, you have learned how to protect yourself or to do what you couldn't do when that impacted you. And you can actually, like open the door for that defense mechanism to leave.
That is very powerful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. But that, that just made a whole lot of sense. What you just said there about, again, what Cork is saying here, that it protects, but shouldn't make you delusional. And I guess to the extent that you are now, grown up, Wendy, you don't need that anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. You're 30 years old, you're 40, 50, you're 70 years old. It has done its job. So you thank it for doing its job, and you say, I've got it from here on out. I'm in therapy, getting the tools, I've grown up, I've whatever.
Right.
So it's a powerful way of doing therapy.
That is. Thank you for sharing that. So Lynette said, not all defense mechanisms are a result of trauma, correct? Aren't some defense mechanisms necessary and a default of being human?
Yeah. So Ms. Broxton, I would believe so. Not all defense mechanism or a result of trauma. I have to kind of think about it because now I'm like, I don't know now. Because why would you need a defense if it wasn't something that was either a harm or a potential or threat of harm? So that's my question to myself is it's a defense. You're defending yourself against something. So it would have to be, even if it was little t trauma, big T, or it was just a trauma that really didn't impact you, but you're still defending yourself against something your mind thinks it's too much, it's too overwhelming. So I would say, and I'm kind of just, spitting ball here, that
right.
all defense mechanism may have the potential to stem from trauma, but
All right, we got Javon with us from Atlanta. Thank you for joining us. So let's go. Antonio said defense mechanisms are many times unconscious. We may not be aware of them. It's when we become aware that we can change. Right? So we might be doing them unconsciously.
Automatically. Yeah.
Unconscious.
Some people might be avoidant of conflict or certain behaviors, and they're just like, that's how I am, that's who I am. And then they realize, oh, it's because of my attachment style with, my caregiver or whatever. And now they have pinpoint the reason or the origin of, where that defense mechanism developed, but for sure is in your subconscious mind.
Okay. Interesting. So let's see. Ozzy mentioned early morning walks, a great way to connect within through nature. He also talked about the earth having a magnetic field, and so are we, yet letting things slip through the cracks without awareness. That is where the pain stays until we deal with it face on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. We got to deal with it. Wow. Yeah, I'm just that visual of what you were just talking about is just kind of playing out in my head. So that's
It was
good.
so powerful. It was a powerful session. I mean, in the moment I was in it, so I didn't see the power behind it. But when I got home and throughout the week and I was reflecting, I was like, this is that's pretty amazing that you don't have to stay with your defense mechanism because of what happened to you. You have the power and the authority to, to say, okay, I've got it from here, and it was pretty powerful.
So again, we often hear people talking about doing the work, but that is a great example of doing the work, like really examining our behaviors and any defense mechanisms that we may have, that we may be doing consciously or unconsciously, and doing away with those that we no longer need, right?
Right. A lot of people were saying doing the work, right? Even though mental health treatment has changed, now it's no longer a taboo. I still believe that mental health, seeking a therapist or, mental health services still carries a little bit of taboo, which is fine. I want to more so focus on the positive impact of mental health and mental health practitioners than focusing on the taboo. But I'm just saying that it still holds some form of taboo for a lot of people, and I can understand that. Being raised as a Haitian, American, I like in our culture, I don't even think we have social workers in Haiti. I think that's like a new thing now. So it's not something, it's like if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if there's something happening that is related to your mental state, it's just there. And that's it. You just deal with it or not, or you become the crazy person of that town or whatever. But there's no real like encouragement to seek out a professional. So because there's still a taboo, I try my best to reframe what therapy is for people, especially if they are older generation or if they're males or if they're some from a certain racial community, like if they're Black or Asian or Latino, like Indians. I try my best to provide a reframe that fits to their culture, because at the end of the day, if you need help, you need help. It doesn't matter what color you are, what sex you are, whatever. If you need help, you should get the help you need. So when you say to do the work or to do the work in therapy, to me, I think that is the most courageous thing someone can do, is to go into therapy and not just bare their hearts, but talk about some hard things that have happened in your life and how you dealt with them or did not deal with them, and then sit and actually sort that out with somebody for the benefit of a better quality of life for yourself, for your children, or for your legacy. So to me, I say the heart work of therapy is hard work. It is hard work to be in there and kind of face your demons kind of thing. It's not for the weak. That's what I say. It's not for the weak.
It
Therapy is
definitely.
not for the weak.
Indeed. Um, okay, so yeah, I think that you're right. There's a courageousness that goes along with that. It is hard work, going back, because you are kind of reliving these experiences as you're talking about them, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so
Right.
that can be traumatic in and of itself, right?
And that's why you have to pair yourself with a really, really competent, skilled clinician.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't need to go back there, or if it's going to re-traumatize you to the point that you don't have that window of tolerance, or they don't know how to tune in with you, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to your window of tolerance, and it overwhelms you again, that is you are at risk of being re-traumatized. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important not just to say, oh, I'm just going to pick a therapist and that's it. You know, you sometimes the first one, second one doesn't work out, and keep going until you find someone who understands you, who is safe, who's empathetic, and who is oh, he has a resource there. It's really good. And who is very skilled at what they do.
Okay, so Antonio gave us a resource in the chat, verywellmind.com, and it's on defense mechanisms. So we'll definitely check that out. Thank you. So, getting with a clinician that, can really help you unpack some of that, right?
Right. Right. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do it alone. That's what I tell myself. That's what I tell my clients, that you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to do it alone.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, getting with a clinician and then utilizing, some of the resources, which again, Antonia's put one out, but that exercise that you talked about, identifying those defense mechanisms and doing away with the ones that are no longer serving you well, is another big piece. And then, um, looking at those different traumas, right? And, um, you know, recognizing them as traumas if they indeed were, and then healing from them, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Trying to think, is there anything else that we missed or that you think we need to, know about trauma speaking in our bodies, in our minds, and within our emotions?
Trying to think if there's I feel like we covered a lot in regards to trauma speaking. I thought it was very interesting, just even in our conversation, that we kind of stumbled upon that phrase, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great reminder for all of us to know that if we have experienced trauma is speaking, but what is it saying? What is the language that it's using? Is it using your body? Is it
Mm-hmm.
using your digestive system? Are you always like, or are you always like, I don't know, I'm just making up stuff now, like over sweating or something,
Mm-hmm.
or, having panic attacks, or, what is it using your body? Are you like going blind or something because you're not dealing with that? Or
Uh-oh. Pwendy, you froze on us. Boo. Technology, I tell you. All right. Well, hopefully we'll get Wendy back. Hopefully, hopefully. Um, but one of the things that she and I talked about was the some of the things that we can do in terms of some resources that are available. Oh, hold on. I think we got her back. Hold on one moment. All right. All right. There we go. All right. So what were you saying, Wendy?
No, I was just finishing the thought of saying, just to ask ourselves, if trauma happened to me and if trauma is speaking to me, what language is it using to speak to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you want to decode that language with somebody, then you would find a mental health professional to do that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, indeed. So I was moving on to some of the resources that you and I had talked about, which of course number one is getting with a counselor, which you have already talked about. But there also may be some social services that are available. I know one of the things that um, African Americans often talk about is the accessibility to mental health resources, whether that is due to proximity of where they are or the cost, it being cost prohibitive. So, a lot of times some of the Black and Brown clinicians don't accept insurance, so that can be cost prohibitive, or they, you know, or they some of them do accept insurance, um, but it might not be your insurance. So that would also take maybe you doing some advocacy, with maybe your insurance carrier to see if they'd be willing to reimburse you for, getting those services taken care of. So, but checking with some social service agencies, because there are some here in Tallahassee specifically, both the city and the county do fund mental health services through some of our community health clinics and some of our community centers. So you may find those services available in your local municipality, within the city or the county or wherever you are located. So you definitely want to check that to see if that's available. We also talked about apps.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yes.
were there some apps that you want to share?
I mean, the main app that I use, are we discussing the podcast or apps?
Apps, and then we can do podcasts. Yeah.
Okay, so the main app that I really use for additional resources is YouTube. To be honest, there are
Okay.
a plethora of resources, free resources on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
about mental health, healing, different, even the question about how do you find out there's a problem, like do I need to have a problem to go to therapy, or
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the defense mechanisms? If you type that into YouTube, you'll find a lot of resources. So I've learned a lot as a clinician on YouTube, and I've also learned a lot for my own healing on YouTube. So
Okay.
that's the main app, YouTube.
So YouTube is the main app. Any particular channels that you tune into?
Oh man, I wish I had them ready, but I do have two. Let me see if I could pull it up. I do have two that are really good. Let me
Okay.
see.
And
Yeah.
while you're pulling those up, Antonio, his question is it important to recognize other people's trauma slash defense mechanisms? And if so, is there any benefit? Ooh, that's a good question.
Let's see. Is it important to recognize other people's traumas, defense mechanisms, and if so, if there are any benefit? I would say yes. I don't know about the importance. I think it's more important to recognize your trauma and your
Mhm.
defense mechanism, because you have more of an opportunity to work on yourself and control how you interact with people and your
Mhm.
boundaries with other people that may have traumas and different defenses. But I do believe it would be beneficial for you to know if, like, mom or dad, or different siblings or whatever, have had some like certain trauma history and what defense mechanism is at play. Sometimes you may not take it as personal or react a certain way if you know what is going on as far as their trauma.
So the thing that comes to mind when I hear that question is, what if they don't identify their experiences as trauma?
Mhm. Yeah. If they don't, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
There's nothing you cannot convince somebody here the same way that you cannot convince somebody that they didn't experience something that is traumatic is the same way that you cannot convince them into their trauma or into identifying it as trauma. So
Mm.
a person can, unfortunately, a lot of times you see people who have disassociative tendencies, and they
Mhm.
black out when the trauma happened. Um, And they're like, I was never abused. I was never, and it's like, there's a news article of you being abused and this was crazy. And they're like, nope, you cannot really convince somebody that for whatever reason, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that they're not accepting it as a traumatic event. You cannot, there's little to nothing you could do about that.
Wow.
But what do you think, Nicole? I'm curious. That's just
Yeah, no, I mean that I hadn't really thought about that until seeing the question, but again, hearing you addressing it, it just again caused me to immediately think about, people being, and I'm gonna call it being in denial, just because based on the definition of what we said trauma is, then they again may have gone through this traumatic experience, but they don't identify it as such. So I just don't know what you do with that.
Yeah. I'm curious. Now I want to talk with Antonio and get his perspective on that answer.
Mm-hmm. Letitia, she said, in the context of a relationship, knowing someone's trauma could help you better put their maladaptive behaviors in perspective. So I definitely think that to be the case. Ooh, but I think this is probably something that you have to keep to yourself, especially if they are professing that they've not gone through any trauma.
Depending on your level of relationship with that person, I would discourage somebody from saying to someone who's not aware that they had a traumatic experience, like, hey, so you were traumatized, you went through this. No, I would discourage it. That the response or what would happen to that person it's not worth it. Just on their own terms, they will, get to the point where they realize that it was trauma or it is a problem or they should work on it. But I would definitely discourage anybody from coming forth and saying
so that's got me real curious. Like in the sessions, how do you get them to like come around to that? Like,
well,
making that realization and having that aha moment, like, oh,
yeah. So let me put a asterisk on what I just said.
Okay.
I'll take it back in the context of a therapeutic relationship, 1,000%, because that is the context, But if it's just mom and dad, I'm thinking about. I thought of the question as far as like family. So if you're working on your own things, you're getting more psychoeducation of trauma, defense mechanism. And now you're starting to like diagnose people and assess mom and dad and uncle and auntie. It's like if they're just like living their lives and they're not aware, I would not recommend going forth and saying to them like, mom, you're traumatized because of this happened, divorce and this and that, and that's why you're acting like this. I don't think it would be in that context. I don't think it would produce a positive results for anybody. For the individual, for the family. I think if you bring mom to one of your sessions and in that space, in that context, you bring it up, there's more safety. There's more of a container to talk about it. To talk about it and end the conversation in that context than just like, saying that, at Olive Garden or Chili's or, at the family reunion. Like, so I'm just going to put an asterisk on that. In the context of a clinical relationship, absolutely. But yeah, in the other context, I wouldn't suggest that.
Okay.
I would be very careful.
All right. So be careful with that.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Lynette said it can be triggering. Ozzy said emotional intelligence starts from you and then with others. Lynette said also in the therapy session, there is a facilitator of the conversation. And my mom said maybe just using the word trauma causes trauma in the mindset of others. Yes, that can be triggering as well.
The word trauma, it triggers, and it could be triggering.
Trauma can be triggering, right?
Yeah.
Javon said, I noticed someone's trauma based on their triggers, and interestingly enough, they were able to point out mine. However, we had a close enough and trusted each other enough to have those discussions. I was grateful because I wasn't able to identify it. Yeah, that could be real powerful.
Yeah.
So Antonio says, so I can't call people out in my family.
You can, but if you come back with a black eye, don't blame me. Don't blame me. Everybody else will be like, I told you.
Antonio, you got a black eye, we gonna know what happened. You
I'll be
called.
like, did I not tell you?
See, we put a disclaimer on this thing. In fact, I didn't even read my disclaimer, but y'all know this is just a conversation, not therapy. Okay. All right. So
I
yes.
did find the two YouTube pages that I enjoy.
Okay.
So there's a girl named Steph Anya. She's
Okay.
an LMFT. She does really great short videos on mental health and disorders and different things of that sort,
Okay.
psychoeducation.
Spell it.
And then
Spell her name.
Steph, S like Sam, T like Tom, E, P like Peter, H like Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Her last name Anya, Anya.
Okay. All right.
She's an LMFT.
And that's
And
on
then
YouTube.
yeah, that's on YouTube. And then there's Mark De Jesus.
Okay.
So this Mark and then DE and then Jesus. The Jesus.
Okay. Mark Jesus.
De Jesus. He's really great as well.
Okay. All right. So those are two YouTube sources. So Javon is trying to get Antonio in trouble. She telling them to do it. Let's know and let us know how it works.
Next episode.
Right. Hey there, Mr. Potter. Thank you for joining us. All right. So so YouTube. All right. So podcasts. What were the podcasts that you recommend?
I really, really enjoyed this podcast. I have never binge anything. I don't really binge Netflix or food or shopping or anything, but
What's
I
wrong with you,
binge this
Wendy?
podcast. That's what my
Good.
friends tell me too. What is wrong with you?
Right. We all being something.
I know. Okay. I mean, I binge Instagram. How about that? I do.
Okay.
I do.
Instagram.
Yeah.
What?
It's hard. I feel guilty not being productive. It's a problem. See, defense mechanisms, not good.
Got it.
But there's a podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves by Adam Young. He's a licensed clinical social worker. And I binge all the episodes and I am always waiting on the next one. I think he's a phenomenal therapist and podcaster.
Okay. All right.
And it's just very therapeutic to learn more about yourself in that way. There's another trauma-based podcast called Living Centered. They have really great educational information on there. And the last one that I would suggest if you have family and children is a podcast called T like Tom, B like boy, RI. So it's called TBRI. It stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. It's a specific type of clinical modality, but they have a podcast and it's really, really informational.
Trust-based relational
intervention.
Okay.
And TBRI, if you look it up on Apple.
Okay. Cool. All right. So we got a couple of YouTube channels. We got like 3 podcasts. Again, check your local social services to see if there are some low and no cost mental health or mental counseling services available. Check with your employer assistance, your EPA, to see if your employer offers some counseling sessions as well. And yeah,
your church, if you are a part of a church, or even if you're not, a lot of churches are now purchasing support groups and they're just hosting the support group at the church. So it's similar to AA, but it's more for emotional needs.
Gotcha.
So there's a program called Celebrate Recovery. A lot of local churches will host that program on their campus, and that could be for trauma, drugs, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, but it's a plethora of different people in there. But
okay, we have to check into that Celebrate Recovery Support Group.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool.
Oh, and last thing, as far as resources, sorry, I'm like,
Oh no, that's good. That's good.
so like resources, I'm always like, Um, so also go on Google and just search for grant funded counseling services. So even at my current employer, there are people that call in and they cannot afford the private pay, they can't afford the sliding scale, and there are a lot of benefactors in there are a lot of donors in our communities that give special fundings for people who need services, is even mental health services, and you can get like 10 sessions, and it's coming out of that grant or that funding bucket. So try googling grant funding, clinical services near me or therapy services near me.
All right. Good point. Good point. Good point. Excellent. All right. Good deal. Um, so Lynette wants to know, am I typing, am I going to type the resources in the comments? Uh, yes, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. I put them down on my sheet, my note sheet. Y'all know I take notes, right? So, but I can do that. I can do that. Not a problem. So Lynette, just give me a little time. Bear with me, but I will. All right. Well, this has been really, really good. I have really enjoyed this. Yes.
Yeah, likewise, I really enjoyed it. It was my first, I think that this is my first interview, so thank you for having me on.
Really? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it was
We have to have you.
fun.
We have to have you come back, Wendy. So give us some, any final remarks and how can folks connect with you?
Sure. Can I just add one last one? Because I don't think we
Sure.
mentioned it.
Oh,
Therapyforblackgirls.com.
mhm.
Therapyforblackgirls.com. So if you want a clinician of color, that is the place to go. If you're female and want a clinician of color, that's the place to go. And I
So,
wanted to say one last point of that psychoeducation can be a form of therapy and healing. Like if you don't have the resources, just
mhm.
go online and look for articles teaching you more about whatever you think might be going on. Like I am feeling anxious, and you'll see like articles of 5 ways to ground, 5 ways to be mindful, or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I write on my website, and I think you had read one of my blog posts and you found it to be interesting and
Yes,
nice. So yeah, if you don't have the resources right now, start by educating yourself on what's going on with you.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, conversations with Nicole,
Yes.
Mindset Monday and Wellness Wednesday.
Yes.
We definitely are offering a space and a place for folks to come and connect and express themselves and hopefully get some healing through connecting with a clinician or some of the other folks that are here that can share their stories. There's something powerful about, um, you know, storytelling, and we learn a lot from one another. So, uh, we definitely want to continue to do that. Continue to do that. So,
Yes.
we've got Wendy's information on the screen at Fresh Living Counseling.
Yes. So my private practice is Fresh Living Counseling. I only take Florida clients at this time.
Mhm.
And you can check me out on FreshLivingCounseling.com or on Facebook or Instagram at Fresh Living Counseling.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to also invite y'all to, for those of you who may be new to the platform, check out Conversations with Nicole. Subscribe to the YouTube channel in particular on YouTube, follow on IG and on Facebook, Conversations with Nicole. So, yes, yes, yes. All right. This has been, again, wonderful. I want to thank you, Pwendy, so much for your insight and telling us, I got a lot of really great nuggets tonight and some, meaningful techniques to utilize in dealing with untreated trauma and healing. So I thought it was very beneficial. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it was my pleasure. Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad to hear
Hmm. Indeed. And thank you all viewers for tuning in, for your comments, your engagement. Y'all were awesome. If this benefited you in some way, please give us a thumbs up or a heart or I don't know, claps or something. Some stars maybe.
Yours.
All right. Something. Let us
All
know.
of the above.
All of the above. Let us know. Let us know you liked it. Let us know you enjoyed it. Let us know that this conversation was beneficial, and let's also keep the conversation going. Let's keep the conversation going around trauma and its speaking and us treating that trauma, and doing the things that we talked about, whether that's getting with a counselor or checking out some of the apps and the podcasts and that sort of thing. All of that is very, very helpful. All right. All right, good people. Well, again, I'm just grateful that you all have been here with us tonight. We will be live on Wednesday, God willing. And my guest is Kevin Hardwick. We'll be talking about therapy burnout. So this is kind of geared to the therapists and the clinicians. So therapy burnout. We will talk about that. And then Thursday, I have a live a candidate, Shelby Green, who is running for city commission. We'll have a virtual meet and greet. So those of you here in the Tallahassee area, I want you to tune in to that at 6:00. This is an opportunity for you to have a conversation with Miss Shelby, find out what her platform is, and ask her some questions around why she's running for office and why she believes she's the best candidate for that particular position. So, all right. Well, you all have a great rest of the evening. And Lynette, I will get those resources in the comments for you. And we will see y'all soon. Bye.